Eliane from Patrick and Poodles, and today we're not talking about sewing, which is what I usually talk about on this channel. We are making hot chocolate bombs. I've been making a ton of these this season. They're super fun to make as gifts, especially as the holidays come rolling around, and I am here to tell you all the tips and tricks that I have learned. I started making hot chocolate bombs and I got frustrated because all of the tutorials that I would find would just say, paint the chocolate in the mold, which, by the way, is just really tedious and futzy. It's very futzy. Even my husband walked by and went, that looks finicky. It is. So we brainstormed different ways to fill the molds that would make it a lot easier so that you can get to the fun part, which is filling them and decorating them. So today I'm going to walk you through the entire process of making a hot chocolate bomb, starting with all of the supplies, how to fill your molds, and then how to assemble your hot chocolate bombs together. First, let's talk about supplies. There are two different types of molds on the market. You can get a silicone mold, and this is one of the ones that fairly common. I feel like this is what you'd find if you looked on Amazon a lot. There's a lot of silicone molds available and they come in a variety of different sizes. So you're looking for a mold that is 2.5 inches in diameter, which is like this one, or 2 inches in diameter, so a little bit smaller. Those are the two main common sizes that you'll find for hot chocolate bombs. If you're out shopping this season and you see hot chocolate bombs for sale, most of the ones that I've seen are 2 inches. The 2.5 inch ones are the ones I see in specialty food stores or other sort of more high-end luxury places because they are just like a really fun, huge treat. So this is one type of mold that you can find, a silicone mold. These work great for unmolding because they're really flexible, that they are easy to get the chocolate out without cracking it. However, they come with two drawbacks. One is that because they are so flexible, once you stick chocolate inside, they tend to press down, leaving you with flat tops and bottoms on your hot chocolate bombs, which can be sort of a disappointment if that's not the look you're going for. The second problem is that you have to sit there and you have to paint in the chocolate. Like I said, most of the tutorials I've seen tell you to do this. Sit there and paint the chocolate in. If you are just making like 5 for friends and family, that's not a big deal. But if you're trying to make a whole bunch for lots of gifts or to make them to sell, this can take a lot of time. So I have a couple tricks that I'll show you when we're actually filling these molds with chocolate as to how I get around that and make it way easier to do. The supplies that you're going to need for those tricks are a lacrosse ball, it has to be a lacrosse ball, and 4 wide mouth mason jars. I like this 8-ounce size. They're not too tall and they're going to be perfect for what we're going to use them for. So get yourself 8-ounce jars and a lacrosse ball. As I go through all of these supplies, you'll see that down in the description below, there's a link to a blog post. I detail all of the supplies in there as well as links to where you can buy everything. So if you're kind of curious about what you need or you don't want to rewatch the video, check out the blog post. It's going to walk you through all of the supplies that you need. The second kind of mold available are these 3-piece molds. These are made out of hard plastic. They have a top and a bottom, and then they have the third piece, so the 3-piece, right? 1, 2, and 3 are these flexible plastic inserts. These are not silicone. I originally thought they would be silicone. They're not. They are flexible plastic. And how these work is that the bottom mold has a line, and it tells you that you have to fill the chocolate to that specific line. So you fill your chocolate, you add in the flexible insert, and then you add the lid on top. These are fantastic for the 2-inch size. So this is a 2-inch size. I love them. They are really easy to use. You can fill them really fast because you can use that line as your guide. You fill them all at once. You can make a whole bunch. They're great. However, I have not tried them in any size larger than 2 inches, and I'm a little worried that they would be hard to unmold. I do have this type of mold in a skull shape, and it is much more difficult to unmold than this 2-inch size one is. So with that in mind, if you're gonna make 2-inch size ones, I like the hard plastic mold. If you're going to make large hot chocolate bombs, I recommend getting the silicone mold. You're gonna need chocolate, right? You're gonna need chocolate for your shell. I like to buy the Ghirardelli melting wafers. They come in dark white. They also come in milk. I could find these two at my local Sam's Club. I've also seen them at my grocery store. They're on Amazon, kind of all over the place. These are really nice. They melt really smoothly. They melt really easily. And I find that they get a really nice shine, a really nice tempered shine on your chocolate shell once they're done. So this is the one that I recommend. They taste really great too. And it's really important to use a chocolate that tastes good, because that chocolate shell isn't just for decoration, it's also going to flavor your hot chocolate. And so you need it to have a really good taste. So sample some, make sure you like the taste before you use them. Something else that you can do with your chocolate shell is, instead of using white or dark, you can use flavored chocolate to get a flavor into your hot chocolate. I've done it with 2 different flavors and they both worked really well, and I like to use Guittard brand melting chips, as they call them, baking chips, for this. So this is Guittard butterscotch baking chips, and these are mint. They taste really, really good. Again, that's really important. The taste is important because you're going to be using them to flavor your hot chocolate, and they melt okay. So the issue with chocolate chips, essentially any sort of baking chips, is that they've been engineered not to melt, because when you're making chocolate chip cookies, you don't want puddles of chocolate all over. You actually want little morsels of chocolate, and so those chocolate chips can't melt in the oven like regular chocolate would. So if you're going to use any sort of baking chips like these, what I do is I mix 50% of this and 50% of the Ghirardelli melting wafers. So when I make butterscotch, I use half butterscotch chips and half Ghirardelli white. The color is going to be a little bit paler than it would be if I just used all butterscotch. However, the flavor is still fantastic, and it helps it to melt easier, helps it to coat the molds a little bit easier. These are going to be a little bit thicker than the melting wafers are. Another option is to use candy melts. So you can find these in craft stores. You can also find them sometimes in grocery stores. And candy melts are designed to use in chocolate making. And they're all coming in different colors and different flavors. So most of the flavors are vanilla, most of the time, and all sorts of colors, red, green, blue, all the colors of the rainbow. However, I have seen caramel flavored, I have seen marshmallow flavored, peppermint, so they do come in different flavors as well. So those are a way that you can use melting candy melts in order to get some of that flavor and also colors. So if you want to do any specialty ones with colors, this is what you'd want to use. For my mint, what I ended up doing is I used 2/3 mint and 1/3 candy melts. So I wanted to make mint chocolate shells that really looked the color mint. They looked green. And I was worried that if I mixed the mint with the white, then they would be a really, really pale color. So I ended up mixing mint with green to get a really nice dark green. The reason that I like to use flavors in my chocolate shell using chocolate that's already flavored is because I want to make hot chocolate bombs that can last for at least a month in your house. A lot of people will add caramel sauce or any sort of like liquid inside of their hot chocolate bombs, but that means that your shelf life really decreases drastically. So in order to be able to make hot chocolate bombs that are shelf stable for a month, I like to use flavors that are already incorporated into chocolate instead of adding them within the bomb itself. So what do I put inside the hot chocolate bomb? Good old Ghirardelli again. So I really like this Ghirardelli sweet ground cocoa. It's a mix of cocoa powder and sugar. That's all that's in there. It's a really good blend. I use this to make hot chocolate all the time, and so it works really well in hot chocolate bombs. One thing to note is that when you're giving people instructions to make hot chocolate bombs, you're telling them to add hot milk, steamed milk poured over that bomb to make it explode, have the marshmallows come out, all the fun things. Because of that, you don't actually need to get a hot chocolate mix that already has milk powder in it. Some of the most famous brands of hot chocolate out there, for example Swiss Miss, are designed that you can use them with hot water, which means they have milk powder inside. The reason that you don't want to use that is because you're really limited in space inside your hot chocolate bomb. You need all the space available to be able to fill it with marshmallows to really get that fun surprise when you pour milk over it. Because you're already using milk, you don't need a hot chocolate that has milk powder. So you can use something like this, which is just cocoa powder and sugar, and it's going to add the sweetness and the chocolatey flavor that you need without filling up the whole chocolate bomb, which would leave you no room for marshmallows. Another good option is Starbucks hot chocolate. So this is the Starbucks salted caramel hot cocoa. And again, I use this instead of using caramel sauce if I want a caramel hot chocolate because it's dry. Everything in here is dry and I'm able to use it and not have to worry about shelf life. So using a high quality mix is going to make a difference as well in the outcome of your product. The most important part of the hot chocolate bomb are the marshmallows. Marshmallows make the big surprise that come out when the milk is poured over them, which is just, I think, super fun. Kids get a kick out of it. Adults do too. It's so much fun. So mini marshmallows work really well, obviously. You can put a lot of them in your hot chocolate bomb, but it's also really fun to add other exciting marshmallows as well. Something like these I got at Target, which are Christmas trees and red stars. So those are going to be really fun for the holiday. And I also like the Lucky Charms brand. So these are large marshmallows, they're not the dehydrated kind, and they have clovers and hearts and moons and stars, and those are really fun as well to come out of your hot chocolate. So those are all options. You can also use dehydrated marshmallows as well. So you can buy the dehydrated Lucky Charms. You can also buy dehydrated like mini marshmallows that are white, and those are nice too if you want to fill even more marshmallows inside your hot chocolate bomb. So again, you're limited on space, so if you can get smaller items, you can get more of them in there, and a mixture of some of these with some of the smaller dehydrated ones works really well. Those are all the supplies that you need to be able to make hot chocolate bombs. Now let's talk about how to fill the shells. Let's start with the shells so that we can get our hot chocolate bombs made. So let's fill our molds. We're going to start with the smaller one, which is the 3-piece mold. One thing about these molds is they tend to be really staticky. So take a clean kitchen towel or a clean high quality paper towel and just kind of run it through all of the cavities on this mold, making sure that you're getting off anything that might have accidentally stuck to it that you don't actually want in your chocolate. So just make sure everything looks clean. These have been washed, but again, with the static that they generate, they tend to attract things. So this is a good practice before you fill them. There's 3 pieces to the 3-piece mold, and the one that's on the bottom is going to be the one, static. It's going to be the one that has kind of these lines that you can see. I've gone ahead and melted my chocolate. I have 80 grams of chocolate here. Each cavity uses 16 grams, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to fill it to this little line that I can see within the mold. Just filling them up. So it's a little bit more. I always err a little bit on the side of slightly less, and then I fill more if I need to. It's okay if you have too much. It'll just overflow and you can get rid of that later. It's not a big deal. It's a good practice to measure out the amount of chocolate that you need. Just means that you're not going to be left with a whole bunch of melted chocolate once your molds are all filled. It saves you a little bit on just your chocolate, and it's not too hard. So 80 grams, each of these was 16 grams, so total of 80 is what I melted, and it fits pretty perfectly right into there. So all of my molds are filled. I'm going to just give them a small tap to get rid of any air bubbles. And now I'm going to take this flexible plastic. It's not silicone, it is kind of a flexible plastic. I'm going to gently place it in the center of each of the cavities. I'm not yet pressing down, just getting them slightly centered. Now take the lid of your mold, place it on top, and press everything down. Once everything's pressed, go ahead and flip it around and leave it for 20 minutes. Right around 20 minutes, depending how warm your house is, you'll feel that this is no longer warm to the touch. So the instructions on the mold say to stick it in the fridge or freezer. I have found that when I do that, I don't get a great shine on my chocolate. So it'll end up kind of sweating because it goes from super cold to room temp. I have found that I get the best results by leaving it for 20 minutes at room temperature. My house is set to 69 degrees, so you might need to leave it a little bit longer. I just say set it and forget it for about half an hour. Go do something else. I'm going to set this one aside, and now let's fill our large mold. So we talked about some of the issues with the large mold, mainly twofold. One, that as you add chocolate, because the flexible mold is flexible, it'll kind of press down, and then you end up with these flat hot chocolate bombs, which is not really fun. So the first hack, the way to fix those, is to use some wide mouth mason jars. I'm going to put 4 wide mouth mason jars down. 1, 2, 3, 4. And the great thing about these is they actually fit like really nicely into here, where they're not interfering with the sides of the mold, and they're not so tight or not so big, right? So these 4 fit really well. You might be able to find other jars or things around your house. So what I do is I use 4 and I prop the 4 end ones. 1, 2, 3, 4, and these 2 can just hang. It's not a big deal because they're going to be suspended anyway by the other ones. So that fixes the problem of flat hot chocolate bombs. The second problem is that a lot of times with these molds, everyone just says to like paint the chocolate in, which is really tedious. Really tedious. And just not time efficient. It's kind of frustrating, it takes a long time, and you're just sitting there kind of painting chocolate. One layer isn't usually enough, so you have to go back in and paint a second layer, and then you're just waiting a long time before you're actually able to unmold them and fill them, which is the fun part of making hot chocolate bombs. So our second hack for this, and this only works if you're using molds that are 2.5 inches wide, so the large silicone mold that I'm using is 2.5 inches wide, is to use a lacrosse ball. So this is a lacrosse ball from a sporting goods store. It's clean, and I'm going to wrap it in saran wrap. So it's not actually going to touch any of my chocolates, but it fits in here with just a little bit of wiggle room on each side. And what that does is it actually gives me this nice shell without having to sit there and paint the chocolate on. So I'm just prepping everything. I'm going to go melt my chocolate and be able to fill these molds. So I have my mold suspended on my mason jars. That's going to keep me from getting flat bottoms on my hot chocolate bombs. And then I have my lacrosse ball ready to use. I need to cut a few pieces of saran wrap. I need 1 piece of saran wrap for every single shell that I'm going to make. So here I have 6 cavities. I would need 6 pieces of saran wrap. They need to be about yay big. So what I like to do is I like to take my saran wrap, and what I'll end up doing is cutting it in half. So I want a square or a rectangle that's about half the width of the plastic wrap and about as long. And I'm going to show you with just the first one what that's going to look like. So it's about this size, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to stick my lacrosse ball right in the center and push the saran wrap up all the way to the top. So it's not going to cover my ball completely, which is fine. I've got a little bit of space here, but it's going to give me that nice smooth edge all the way on the other side. So that's ready to go. I've got my second piece of saran wrap. I'm going to make 2 so that I can make a full hot chocolate bomb. If you're using the 2.5 inch mold, each of these cavities uses 25 grams of chocolate. So if you're going to do all 6 cavities and fill them all, you're going to want to melt 150 grams of chocolate. I'm going to do two halves, which equals 1 hot chocolate bomb. And then for that, then I need 50 grams of chocolate. Okay, I have my 50 grams of chocolate. I'm going to make sure that my lacrosse ball saran wrap is nice and smooth. I'm going to set that to the side. And because I'm doing 50 grams, which is enough for 2, I'm just going to take this mixture and separate it evenly within the 2 cavities. Now here's where the lacrosse ball comes in. So if you're gonna fill all of them, fill all of them, and kind of try to work a little bit fast at this point because you don't want the chocolate setting too much. You've got some leeway. Obviously, it's melted chocolate, so it's got a little bit of time, but you definitely want to not kind of like set it in the molds and then like go do something. Pour it in, use the ball, then go do something for like half an hour. Okay, so with the top of the ball, the part that isn't covered in saran wrap up, I'm going to take this and I'm going to gently press it into my cavity. I'm going to let the ball kind of help. Lacrosse balls tend to be a little bit hefty in weight, so it's going to help push down and get that chocolate all the way up. Once I see the chocolate as a ring all the way around the top, I'm going to gently take the ball out, leaving the saran wrap in place. A little twist or wiggle helps here, trying to lift it out without touching the saran wrap. I'm going to take that second piece of saran wrap, wrap it around my lacrosse ball, and repeat it with my second cavity. So here we go, wrapping it all the way to the top with the part that isn't covered in saran wrap facing up, placing the ball into the cavity, letting the lacrosse ball gravity help till I see chocolate as a ring all the way around the top. Once I see that, gently peeling away the saran wrap, trying not to shift it too much, and gently pulling the ball out, leaving the saran wrap in place. You're going to leave them till you can put your finger and touch and have it not be liquid. So it should be nice and hard when you touch the chocolate shell. Definitely just leave it about half an hour usually till it sets properly. Again, you'll be able to sit there and you'll be able to touch it. Right now, if I touch it, you'll see that saran wrap move. The chocolate underneath it is still liquid. You don't want to try to move the saran wrap. If you see a little spot and you say, oh, I didn't get chocolate there, like I missed it, leave it. Leave it till it's hard. You can paint or fix anything once the chocolate is hardened. You might think, oh, I can just shift the saran wrap a little bit and fix it right now. And trust me, it'll be worse. I have tried that and it gets to be a really frustrating mess. So leave them. Once they're hard, you can touch up any edges that you need to before unmolding. It's been 20 minutes for these and they're cool to the touch. So now we have one more thing we have to do before we can unmold them. You want to put them in the freezer for 2 minutes. Not 3, not 1, 2. Set a timer, specifically 2 minutes. You leave them in there too long. When you take them out, they're going to sweat and they're going to lose their shine. I have tried to just leave them at room temperature all night and unmold them the next day, and they still are kind of frustrating to get out. So the freezer trick I have found has been the easiest way to make sure that I can unmold them quickly, easily, without any headache. So in the freezer they go, 2 minutes, set a timer. They've been in the freezer for 2 minutes. You can notice that this one looks really opaque. So before they all looked really shiny, this one looks opaque. It means it's pulled away from the mold, which means it's going to be really easy to unmold. That's also why you want them to cool for like 20 minutes at room temperature. If you try to rush it, they're so warm, you put them in the freezer, they won't be cold enough and they won't unmold easily. So what we're going to do is we're going to take the cover off. And we want to leave that plastic insert, that flexible plastic, leave that in there. You want to take it and you want to be able to pull them right out. So that plastic insert is going to help you to be able to grab on to your hot chocolate bombs easily without actually touching the hot chocolate bombs. So that's 3. Sometimes if they are a little stuck, you just want to wiggle them around. You'll be able to see them pull away from the mold itself and come right out. There we are. So how easy is that to unmold? Pretty dang simple. So I'm going to put this to the side. Now I want to take them off of the flexible plastic insert so that they are ready to go to fill. We're just going to grab the edge of it, grab the edge of the flexible plastic, and just gently pull it away from the edge of the mold. So if you'll notice this fell off. That's okay. That's not actually the edge. So this is my edge. This is overflow. And I'm not going to worry about pulling off any overflow. If you try to pull this even right now, what you're going to end up doing is breaking it and breaking it further. If some of it cracks off, leave it. If some of it doesn't crack off, leave it. And when we seal them, so when we put them on a hot plate to get that nice straight edge, that little extra is just going to fall right off onto our plate. So I just let it be. My goal is always to not make a problem worse, right? So same thing with this one. I'm going to just gently peel it off. There we are. That one fell right off. Three. You can see I was talking about earlier about static. And see how this is like stuck on? Static, baby. Now your mold is ready for the next use. If you have a lot of chocolate that you want to make, you can actually reuse the mold over and over and over again. I recommend doing like all dark chocolate shells or all white chocolate shells instead of trying to go from dark to light to butterscotch to mint to dark. You're going to get a little bit of cross-contamination if you try to do it that way. But let's say I finished these and I needed more dark chocolate shells. So this only made 5. It's obviously going to make 2.5. I would still need at least one more half shell, if not more. Then I could reuse my mold. I would use my clean towel and wipe it off on the inside really well, wipe off all the pieces, and then go ahead and melt more chocolate and start the process over again. So that was the small ones using the 3-piece mold. Just gonna push them off to the side. Now let's talk about how to unmold the large ones out of a silicone mold. So I've left this to sit. I can touch the inside of the molds now. The chocolate is no longer melted. I can feel that it's cool to the touch. So I'm able to unmold it. I'm going to gently pull the saran wrap away, making sure that none of it is sticking to the mold itself. So if you end up with a crease, just make sure that you're pulling all the saran wrap off. You don't want to give somebody saran wrap in their hot chocolate bomb. And then I'm going to inspect my mold. If I see that there's some spots that need to be filled, I'm going to do that before I unmold it. I'm going to melt a little bit of chocolate and maybe fill in some of these gaps that I see that look a little thin. You might get that around the edge sometimes if when you pushed it up it didn't come all the way to the top. That's normal. So this one looks like it needs a little bit of filling. So I'm going to leave this one and I'm going to fill it a little bit more using just a little bit of melted chocolate and a paintbrush. I'm going to fill in those edges. But this one here looks fine. So I'll show you what I'm going to do with that one. Flip the mold upside down. I'm going to gently put my thumb on top and use my hand to push the mold. I'm peeling the mold away from my chocolate shell, using my thumb to help guide the shell out of the mold. And here we are. This one I'm going to set aside. I'm going to fill it a little bit more. It's finally time to fill our hot chocolate bombs. So grab your hot chocolate mix and your marshmallows and your shells, and we're ready to start. One thing that I have noticed makes the process easier. Find a little glass around your house where your hot chocolate bomb shell can sit on top. What you're looking for is that the shell doesn't sit completely inside, that it's elevated. It's going to make it a little bit easier to fill them. So this size works really well for the small bombs, and this size works really well for the large ones. See how that'll fit in there. For the small hot chocolate bombs, the 2-inch bombs, you can fit a tablespoon of hot chocolate mix and then as many mini marshmallows as you can, usually around 10 to 12, depending on your marshmallows. The large hot chocolate bomb, you want to put 2 tablespoons of hot chocolate mix and then as many marshmallows as you can. We're going to start with 1/2 of our shell. We're going to place it on our warm plate. I've warmed the plate up in the microwave for a minute. Your microwave might vary, your plates might vary. And I'm going to melt it so that I get a nice smooth edge. I specifically grabbed this one, which I know had a large piece on the side. And what I'm doing is I'm just kind of melting that specific edge slightly. And then it's going to just fall right off. Look at that. So just be gentle, take your time. Now melt it down so that the whole top edge is nice and smooth. Place that inside your vessel that's going to hold it up. Grab your hot chocolate mix I'm using salted caramel, yum. Here is a half a tablespoon scoop, so I'm gonna put 2 level tablespoons, or 2 level half tablespoons to create 1 tablespoon. The reason I'm using a half tablespoon instead of a full tablespoon to fill it is so that I don't spill all over. So if my scoop was much bigger than this, it would be hard for me to place it inside the shell without spilling. Once you have a tablespoon in the small one, or 2 tablespoons in the large one, take the back of your measuring scoop and tap it down to create a little divot in the center. That makes it a little bit easier to fill even more marshmallows. Hot chocolate bombs are delicious, but the marshmallows that come out of them are the really fun surprise for people, and that's why it's fun to get as many as you can inside here. Take your top of your shell, your other half, melt that gently on your plate. I like using the plate method versus trying to use a warm pan. I have found it to be a little bit easier to control. You do have to reheat your plate every so often, but I think it's worth it. And I almost forgot the marshmallows. So before you heat your other half, go ahead and grab some marshmallows and fill as many as you can inside your shell. So it kind of helps if you squeeze them a little bit, get them into a ball, and then stick them right in the center. You're trying to have them not touch the edge where you need to seal. So that looks like the right amount. Now I'm going to take this other half, gently warm it on the plate to melt the edges, and I like to get the top extra melty. I want it to help give me a really good seal. So I've got a lot of chocolate here to help seal. I'm going to place it on top, give it a good press. I'm going to hold it here for a couple seconds. If you don't want fingerprints on your hot chocolate bombs, you can definitely use gloves. And then when I release, my hot chocolate bomb is sealed. It's sealed all the way around. That little extra melty chocolate helped to really seal it up, and now it's ready to decorate. So you can decorate on top as fancy as you want, as limited as you want. Something really classic is to just drizzle a little bit of chocolate, add some sprinkles. This is a salted caramel, so maybe I want to add some little Heath chips, little toffee chips to show that it's going to be caramel on the inside. Definitely you can go as fun and wild with the different characters as you want, or as simple. So that's how to make hot chocolate bombs from start to finish with different kinds of molds, the easiest way to make them, the best way to fill them. Again, I'm Eliane from Patrick and Poodles. It's not normally the kind of video that I do, but I hope you enjoyed it and I hope you learned something. Everything that we talked about here is listed in the description below. Where to buy the molds, how to make them, my favorite chocolates for this. All of it's in the blog post, again, in the description below. And have fun this season and make everyone you know hot chocolate bombs. Thanks for watching.